We'll call to order the monthly meeting of the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If you guys will review it and any changes, if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second that.
It's been first and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment on matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to matters on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the our minutes from October 19th, 2017.
I'll make a motion to accept them.
I'm trying to find mine. I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from October 19th, 2017. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Review of monthly year-to-date revenue and expenses.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. This presentation summarizes the agency cash position for September 2017. The starting position for the agency in September was approximately $9.6 million. During the month, the agency received approximately $5.3 million in true-up revenue from the state, 2.8 for quarter 23 and 2.5 million for quarter 24. On the expense side, we had approximately $16,000 in administration expenses. We had $106,000 in transfers to the O&M agencies, and approximately $2.2 million in construction activity. Most of that was related to the AECOM contract and the WSP construction management contract. Total expenses for the month were $2.4 million, and the agency's cash position in 870-871 for the month was 12.5. The overall cash position with Fund 257, the advanced fund account, brings the agency's cash position for September to $33.4 million. In October, we'll see the third real estate payment arriving for the agency for $1.5 million, which will make the revenue for the year in October approximately $6 million. And as of November 3rd, the agency's position was $28.6 million, which reflect ongoing spending in the Southport project. And what we'll see now with the weather getting wetter and construction slowing down is we'll see the true-ups catching up, and our cash position overall will go down, but our cash position in 870, 871 liquid money to spend will go up. And right now, we're anticipating in March or April next year, we'll be doing another advance for next season's construction. And that ends the report for September.
Okay. The true-ups happen on a quarterly basis, is that?
Yeah, we wait until the quarter is done, so we have the all the expenses done, captured for that quarter, and then do the reconciliation, and then send it over to DWR for review. They ask any questions they have, and then we finalize the numbers, and they send out a letter saying that for that period, that amount of the advanced revenue is deemed earned, and we move it from 257 over to 871, and we can spend it again.
Okay. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, I have one. On the true-up, I went back through my records. When did we start the true-up system?
When?
Yeah, 'cause I
For
couldn't
this-
find any copies beyond 3 years.
We started truing up under the construction funding agreement in 2011. And in a couple months ago, I summarized all the payments in a table, and I can bring an updated version of that table next month, and you can see the full history of that.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
thanks.
No consent items this month, so we'll move on to our regular agenda, which is item 5, consideration of adjustments for actual revenue expenditures for our 2016-17 year.
morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Nitesh Sharma with the City Finance Budget Manager. Today, I'm here to present to you the updated numbers for 16-17 and also talk about some related fiscal actions for fiscal year 17-18. As noted in the report, the prior fiscal year numbers 16-17 are being finalized by the Wesafka auditors, Richardson and Company. A full report will be presented to the board in some time in the next meeting, hopefully by December, if not January. I just want to go to the slide and just give you a highlight of today's.
Is it in your report?
It's actually not in the, it's attachment 1 of the report, but it's a summarized version, but I can go ahead and talk about attachment 1, which actually puts together the original budget, what we projected for 16-17, and the projection was presented to the board, if you remember, on June 29th, and the board had a couple of comments, and we actually finalized the numbers, and we did a true-up, so I'm going to go ahead and discuss that more in detail.
The presentation's up now.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is more of a summarized version of attachment 1. As you can see, the total revenues were very close to the budget and projected. And this is primarily due to the 2% increase. We know what our revenues we're expecting. On the expenditure side, we are reporting that into 3 separate categories: staff support cost, other operating expenses, and transfers out to debt service cost. As you can see, the total actual expenditures were below the projected by 302,000 and by original budget of 238,000. A couple of things that I wanted to point out is these other operating expenses included a couple of expenditures that the board had questions on, and as listed below, the lobbyist expense and general administration of Wesafka. As noted, the projected was 495 when we presented to you and on June 29th. The actuals were 339, and a total adjustment of 156,000 from prior year will be posted in current year because we don't want to make changes to prior year. It's getting audited. However, that number is going to show up when I'm going to be here next quarter to give you a presentation. So you'll see that adjustment being posted for 17-18. Going forward, as in the staff report is stated, the lobbying expenses are being reduced for state. It's going from 60% to 3%, which is a net savings of 38,000, and also the federal side of it, it's going from 60% to 50%, and there's also a savings in there too. Next slide, please. So this slide is something I added on. It's not really highlighted in the report, but it's in the numbers. What I wanted to show you in this slide is how's the Wesafka cost, the staff cost is total and how it's getting reimbursed. So as you can see, the total administration cost, including general administration cost, which is the overhead, is $1.2 million. Of this $1.2 million, we actually get 87% or $1 million through capital work orders, which are funded by state grants. So only of that amount, as you can see, 159,000 is truly the cost of Wesafka program for last fiscal year. So this sort of answers the question that a lot of staff going forward, every position in Wesafka is a billable position. So if they're working on city project, we'll make sure that that revenue is accounted for and credited back to Wesafka fund properly. So part of my presentation to you on a quarterly basis is to determine how much revenue is being accounted through other work orders outside Wesafka and what is the credit to Wesafka fund. And also, as a bottom, I kind of discussed that already, that lobbying cost we are making adjustment and billable staff for all positions. So with that said, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have or anything you want to see in the next quarterly presentation. I'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
On, under appropriations detail.
Uh-huh.
Item 50, it has a 5,200 plus on it.
Yes.
For other operations and maintenance, what does that really consist of when you
Good.
talk about other?
Good question. So as you can see, the budget was 79,000. The actual expenditures was almost $10,000. This pays for staff's training and travel, supplies that they use in the office. So it's just mostly like household expenses. Just mostly it's training, travel, and meals is that majority of that expense.
And then item, let's see, it's 5,200 plus on operations and maintenance. Membership dues, training, who are we training?
So there's a couple of, it's showing up two places, and there's one, at the bottom where it shows up, it's truly WSAFCA cost. It's like if WSAFCA is promoting any event, a flood event, those are the costs posted here. So I don't have a detail of that, but it's, if WSAFCA is in a membership to any organization, it's posted here. So this is truly WSAFCA cost. The top portion, 5,200, that's under city staff cost, those are the staff that you have, and that's their cost. So it's separated out. So if the board member is traveling, and if there is a cost to that, that's posted at the bottom.
So, Bill, one of the things that, a couple of things that I know that would be in that category would be like the cap-to-cap trip that the board members took, and also membership to the California Central Valley Flood Control Association also shows up there. So that's where those are being captured.
Thank you. I have another question. Just below that, on 5310, contributions to other agencies, $125,000. What other agencies are we making contributions to?
So that is actually a one-time deal. That was for the tree mitigation activity for the Southport levee project, and that actually ended in 16-17. There's no future contributions on that.
Why was that not incorporated in with a project? Or is this under our Fund 870? Why wouldn't it be applied towards a West Sacramento levee project or not?
We can take a look at that.
Yeah, it just seems,
we can take
seems
a
like
look at
that, you know, the reason for the mitigation was the tree removals for,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah, let me take a stab at this. So
Yeah.
this was basically an in lieu fee paid to the city tree fund in lieu of having to pay for tree mitigation, since we already were covering most of that through California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So that was the agreed upon in lieu fee between the agency, myself, and Ken Rusich at the time, and the city for the city's tree mitigation. It was a one-time amount of $250,000 split over 2 fiscal years, and as Nitish pointed out, last year was the last payment. But more to your point, if it was for the Southport, at least I think to your point, that if this is related to the Southport project, should this be captured as part of the Southport cost? I think that's a very good point, and we'll work with finance to see how we can make that happen. And it should be eligible for
It's
reimbursement.
worth exploring.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Okay.
And I have one other question.
Sure.
Last month, we had going over this, I requested that we have a line item somewhere in here that would reflect the amount of funds that come from the city pertaining to taxes, you know, the Section B and all this type of thing,
Measure V?
which didn't come up on this at all. So I just have a wonder as to where those, how can we look ahead with our dollars? If there's something different that we're looking at, tell me and we'll talk about it.
So I think the short answer is, I think we can bring something to the board next month that shows our total revenue and expenses to date and our projections moving forward in order to complete the entire levy improvement program. And we can start presenting those to you perhaps on a quarterly basis, along with the presentation that finance is proposing to do. And that way you, at least on an ongoing basis, you see what our total revenue is to date and what our plans are for those revenue expenses moving forward. And it captures the transfer from Measure V that we received in 15, 16, or 16, 17?
15, 16. I think.
15, 16. And then it also programs out when we anticipate receiving the next allocation from Measure V.
Measure
So
Okay.
we can bring that forward in December.
December, maybe January.
Well, we can bring the cash flow model and show you next month. There's not a problem with that. But maybe on a going forward basis, we can do it quarterly.
Yeah.
Along with the budget update.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be good. Bill, anything else?
Yeah, no, I don't.
Okay. I got
I want to have a conversation with you after the meeting for a minute. Just a couple of things.
few comments, Natish. One, if these extra slides, if we could get a copy of those just to put in our files or records to
Absolutely.
try to keep all this stuff straight. And a quarterly update is, I think, a great idea to keep us all fresh as to what's going on. Just a couple of comments. The general administrative adjustment, down to 249, it's still a mystery to me how that's calculated and done, and at some point, I wouldn't mind being educated a little more in it, versus, how we have our ICAP folks and non, and how that's all computed versus other city departments would be worth knowing. So, but you guys have come up with an adjustment now, and, we'll live with that, as we go forward. On the lobbying, you made the adjustments, and then you're showing forward next year. You got an adjustment in the state as well as the federal lobbyists, and that total for next fiscal year is about 76,700. Why wasn't the prior year closer to that amount versus the 100,000?
Actually, it's based on total cost. Last year's cost was reconciled based on 50%, and the total cost it came. This year, it's a projected amount, so as you can see, it could be close to 100,000 when we end of the year, but I don't think it's going to be more than that. But right now, based on our current scope of work and the cost estimate we have, based on the contract, it's about 77,000.
Yeah, because the contract's a
Yeah.
fixed amount. It has been in the previous several years, and I know the federal one is up for renewal in
yes.
December, so be curious what transpires there. But, so this 76 is just an estimate based on what they anticipate the scope of work is, huh?
Yes, because as you said, December, we're going to be going back with that contract again, so we'll see where we land, and we will be back to the board for Wasafka's share of the cost.
Okay, because in the past, we haven't been, so that would be good.
Yeah.
To be informed as to, what we're committing to as well. So, then on the last thing, you're asking for an approval or something, and then adjustments to the 2017-18 budget going forward. I would like to, as part of your December presentation, to freshen up the budgets, biannual budget that we approved. And just, Bill brought up the issue of the other operations and maintenance and how that was, originally projected at 79, then reduced, and then the actual final was 10,000. And then we got our budget in there going forward at 21,000. The lobbying is in there at 50,000. I would like to have you bring forward, a revised budget for us to look at.
Absolutely.
As part of
Actually,
that December.
that's the goal, and what we're going to provide in the next meeting, and hopefully, I'm trying to come in December, but I actually have time off during the meeting date, so I may come in January, but we're going to provide a detail that's going to be attached, so you can see line item, you can see
Okay.
training, travel, you can see office supplies. You can see everything. It's a detailed budget, just like we present to city council. We present a summarized version, but attached is also a detailed version. So we'll go ahead and do that. I think it's important for the board to look at all that, so
Okay.
I'll be willing to put together that.
So based on that, I don't know if we have anything to approve today. We can just, accept the report, but,
I decided to take these questions to Greg right now.
okay.
Greg?
Greg, we got,
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I haven't asked it yet. The following construction activities, this is page 2 of 5 on the FUD,
this on the report?
yeah. Explain to me, now we're talking about culverts.
You want me to explain the drainage culvert installation?
Yeah, it's the following construction activities, and down here it says install culverts throughout the project area for ditch access.
Well, hang on for just one second. So
Are
I just
we
want
there yet,
to, before we
or-
move on to
Yeah.
that, I want to make sure that we've completed all the actions on the previous agenda item.
I think, is there a question, is there a need for us to actually approve the unaudited numbers to move forward, or can we just, as the chair mentioned,
Just accept the report.
receive the report?
Just accept the report, because
Yeah.
we're going to be back with the actual
Okay.
audited document and with the budget update like the board has requested for 17-18, with the proposed adjustments to lobbying cost and any other expenses.
Okay, I'll move receipt of the report.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll second that.
Aye.
First, second, and all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Nitish.
And then if I could, Mr. Denton, I'd like to perhaps, Chair, we could move on to the next item and allow
We'll let Ken
our
do his
Ken
thing.
Godleski fill you in on all the construction details.
Are they working today, Ken?
They're doing some cleanup work right now, but there ain't much going
Yeah.
on. A little bit of yesterday, too. But good morning, Chairman Ramos, members of the board. To answer your question, Mr. Denton, the culverts that we're referring to over there, when we built Village Parkway, we built the roadside ditches and all the associated drainage with it. As part of that, we cut off access to a few of the ditches for RD 900s folks. So we need to go ahead and place culverts in there, 15-foot wide roads, so they can do that. Some of those have already been installed, some of them still need to be installed. At this time, we won't be installing them because we've got some of the levee work and cleanup work we're doing, but they're hoping to use that as fill-in work as we go into the winter and keep their laborers and an operator or two busy. So that's what that particular item's about.
Good.
Because we took care of all the borrow one stuff that's been restored, but that's really the outstanding stuff we have for the culverts.
Okay.
So let me go ahead and roll into project updates. So the last 30 days, so October into the beginning of November, we've completed the demolition work, underground facilities primarily, so it's water, wells, and septic tank abandonments, filling out the paperwork, getting that closed out through Yolo County, and we should be with the majority of that being done this year. We do have some wells we're pulling construction water out of, and that'll go into next year. So we'll continue to have those open, but everything else within the project area will be closed out. Borrow 1 ramp construction and restoration has been completed. We paved out the ramp entrances on both sides, and we've restored it. We're going through some of the punch list items, but at this time, there's some hydroseed that needs to be sprayed out there and whatnot, but most of the work's already been completed. It's considered substantially complete at this point. Roadway construction, so some of the stuff associated with that ramp, as well as the South River Road realignment at the south end of the city has been completed, and Access Road 6, which essentially was a driveway to the last property that wasn't already receiving access off Village Parkway. So with that construction completed, now the only points of access that South River Road's used for is for the marina entrances. All residents have access via either Village Parkway, the private access roads we built, or this recent driveway that we ended up doing. The offset area and River Park 2 explorations, we've gone ahead and opened up a new area for borrow material, to drier material that they're able to incorporate and not have the saturation issues we were running into as we went deeper in some of the other borrow areas. So that work's ongoing. Utility removal, that was primarily associated with the South River Road realignment. Since that was completed, that work's been done. We have a few encroachments in the existing levee that'll be done with the levee degrade work, but at this time, a majority of those utilities have been removed. Slurry wall construction to the south end of the setback levee has been completed, and currently have them demobilized, but with the option of having them back out here beginning of December, if we get the weather and enough embankment built in front of them to do an additional 2,000 foot of slurry wall construction. That gets me to the upcoming work. So setback levee embankment fill, it's happening in three areas primarily. We have the deep section, which we have some settlement we need to go through, so they're getting the material on there to a certain elevation to get that going, and we can start the date on settlement for that. We've got the north of Bees Lake, that 2,000 foot that I mentioned, levee embankment work they need to get going there, and they're also doing construction work at the roadway S-ramp that's going to be going up to the yacht club. They'll go ahead and continue to work on that as long as weather allows them. Their goal is to go ahead and get that up to about finished elevation, so next year they can pave that out first thing, and we can provide access via Village Parkway at that time. And we can start to open up the north and south areas for levee degrade work as soon as that's available. We're going to continue to borrow site prep and harvest, primarily in River Park 2, but we have some of our clay material in A3, so that'll be ongoing. Like I said, all weather dependent. We've got erosion and sediment control, BMP installation and maintenance. So if you go out there, you'll see that green mulch that's being sprayed on a lot of our stockpiles, as well as some of the adjacent loose dirt. So that'll continue to be done through the end of this week and into the beginning of next week, depending on what they have left. And then we'll continue to work with the Reclamation District to see any other areas we need to perform maintenance on. We've got silt fence, that's that black fence you see throughout the project. We'll continue to have to maintain that, and as those things get pushed aside or as the maintenance is needed, we'll go ahead and do that. We're doing some site cleanup. Primarily right now, that's in removal of some of the debris, mostly the tree debris that was cleared and grubbed at the beginning of the year. They're relocating a lot of that to closer to Village Parkway, so they can ship that once there's subcontractors available for that and truck that off. But that's primarily the site cleanup work that's current right now. So you'll see a big pile of just stumps and tree debris and whatnot coming off Village Parkway just south of Davis Road. That's what that is. They essentially want to make sure we get it away from the toe of the levee so that if we have any flood fighting or maintenance we need to do, it's out of their way. I mentioned before the slurry wall construction in the setback levee. We're looking to get the northern 2,000 foot from essentially Bees Lake towards Linden Road completed later on this year. We'll see if the weather allows us to do it. These last couple days have slowed them down, and we'll see how things dry out and how they're allowed to go ahead and continue to do work, but that would go ahead and get the slurry wall through the yacht club entrance and a little further to the north so that we could focus on finishing construction there, as well as levee embankment moving to the north. And we continue, as we're doing all this work, to do biological surveys, have our tribal monitors, cultural coordination, all that stuff. As things are winding down, the number of folks out there are as well. I think once we get past mid-December, you'll see things slow down quite a bit. But we're working on plans with the contractor right now on what crews are going to be available throughout the winter, points of contact, things of that nature, and also planning for next year. There's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of planning associated with that.
Can I ask a quick question, kind of related?
Sure.
Kind of, I think. Are we having any issues with trespassing, or, I did one day driving down Village Parkway see a motorcyclist who appeared to be next to the project, just screaming down the road, and I didn't know, should I call you, should I call the PD? And I didn't really, it's one of those things, I'm so protective of the project, so I'm like, don't ruin the project, Are we having any, is that just a one-off that I happen to see the one guy doing that?
It happens after hours. It happens on the
Yeah.
weekends, folks going out there and kind of seeing what it is. Because we do have access still off of South River Road there on top of the levee. You have the folks that are parking up there and kind of just looky-loos, want to see what's going on and everything else like that. Our contractor does have security out there, and they do have their own folks that are actually in trailers at the Locks property, but they do drive through the project on the weekends to check on it. You could go ahead and call the on the weekends and at
Non-emergency
nighttime,
one, yeah.
PD would be
Yeah.
the ones if you wanted to get an immediate response, but it's just something they're dealing with. For the most part, if you drive by in there in the nighttime, you'll see their security lights over north of, just south of Linden, north of Davis, where their equipment is as a deterrent.
Right.
But with as large as the area is, and like I said, it's not fenced off, so there's just an opportunity for folks to come over there. So as far as vandalism for the equipment, it hasn't been too rough, but there have been some things taken, some things, batteries stolen, stuff like that, but nothing major. We're having them fence off, like, the wall areas or any areas where we have excavations to keep people out of there, stuff like that. But, yeah, we've had to deal with some folks coming.
Will they have
in.
security during the winter, or?
Yeah, so
Okay,
they're
okay.
going to have a couple staff actually stay here throughout the winter.
Okay.
Primarily their superintendent, but that'll be part of the plan they present to us, and I'll be out there every single day checking it myself too. But, like I said, a lot of this stuff happens after hours and on the weekends, so.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions in that regard? All right. So here's some updated pictures on the current work that's going on. So the setback levee embankment fill, like I mentioned, we're working in the area of the deep wall section. That's that top photo. That's in the vicinity just south of Davis, next to one of our borrow areas. And we're working on the 2,000-foot north of Bees Lake. So on the bottom picture, that's what that is. The tree line kind of delineates the north end of Bees Lake, and then working our way north from there. Slurry wall installation was done all the way to the south end. This is about a week and a half prior to that being completed, so showing them working their way to the south. Like I said, since then they demobilized and are waiting to come back out as long as the embankment's in front of them. Like I said, weather will let us know how far we can get towards that, but that's our goal, at least, to get an additional 2,000 foot done. The borrow and restoration, like I said, for the majority of it is complete. Up in the top picture, that top left-hand corner is the drainage pond where they did all their excavation and hauling work. A majority of the site itself was untouched, as you can see. We've got a couple areas we used for access that we've taken some of those strippings and spread them, and they're going to incorporate that along those paths. And in the bottom picture is the Y ramp. Since that picture has been paved, we do have a gate that needs to be installed down there, but for the most part, that's complete as well. And some of the roadway improvements. This is around the South River Road realignment, so the striping's been done. We do have delineators and signs still up there because they have to get the markers down, as well as some of the signage associated with that, but it's looking good. In that area, the only other areas that we paved, like I mentioned, were borrow and access ramp, and then the driveway at the north end of the project. But
You say realignment, but it doesn't look like it was realigned very much.
it was realigned. It wasn't much, but like I said, there was, and the majority of that was to be able to get the slopes that we needed on the new levee embankment once
All right,
that gets
all right.
constructed. But yeah, it was a slight realignment, not much of one, and the abutments ended up staying when it was all said and done. That's all I've got. Any questions?
Where, the River Park 2 Borough site, where is that exactly?
That's just south of Davis Road on the west side of Village Parkway, so where we had A4
Okay.
and a lot of the work being done on the east side, this is just adjacent to it.
So be on the west side of, okay, so kind of behind the homes on Davis
Yeah,
Road.
behind the homes,
Okay.
exactly. So we've had to go ahead and talk to them, like I said, regarding dust, and since they're working next to those residents, make sure the working hours are working within their allotted hours for that, so 7 to 5:30 is what they've been working on. But they're hoping to get about 50,000 cubic yards out of that particular area, and because it's a drier material, incorporate it in some of the areas they've already done, as well as build a new embankment out of it. So that was their main reason to go there, so they can continue with production.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We enjoy it. Greg, the regular West Safka project updates?
Thanks, Chairman Ramos and board members. Just to follow up on something that Mark reported on earlier about the revenue received from real estate. So there's a nice table that he put together in the program update that summarizes the state cost share reimbursement that we've received for real estate. So our real estate lead, Paul Dirksen, has done an excellent job putting these packages together. So far, we've received over 50% of the state reimbursement. As far as I know, in the flood community, this is kind of an unprecedented time frame to get reimbursement from the state on real estate. Yes.
Very good.
So he's done a fantastic job, and he's continuing to throughput other packages. I think we have another one that he's trying to get through before the holidays, but that may be challenging. But that's also, I think, on the order of 3.5 million. So he's rocking and rolling and doing a great job. And it's really helped to stabilize the agency's cash position and allowing us to move forward with construction and keep our cash flow positive. So it's been very helpful. So briefly on cultural resource inventory, we've completed all of the inventory reports. There were 4 of them related to the project. They've all been reviewed and approved. 3 of them have findings of no adverse effect. We have one, the Phase 2 inventory report, where there is a site near the 3000 South River Road area. We're in the process of putting together a historic properties treatment plan in order to be able to move forward. And our proposal at this time is to use some of the heterogeneity features or the elevated features that are going to be in the completed offset area. We're going to shift those elevated features over to where the site is in an attempt to avoid it completely. So our mitigation for that site is avoidance, and at this point, it looks like may not be able to completely avoid it, but that's our goal, and it's looking pretty good thus far. So we're continuing to work with our design team to get that slight line work modified. Then we're going to be meeting with the Corps and our consultant to get approval, or at least conceptually, and then we can finalize that property, the historic property treatment plan, and get that through consultation with the Corps. So those will be happening, that'll be occurring over the winter as construction winds down. And our goal is to have that all avoided and dealt with so that next year's construction can proceed uninhibited by this particular site.
May I ask the nature of what was found? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing on the order of human remains or anything of that sort. It's, I don't even know really how to describe it. It's basically shell material.
Okay, like a fishing, like a place where maybe, okay.
Gathered, ate.
Yeah, okay.
May have fished. It's not a real big concentration, so it's fairly loose, but we weren't sure what we would find, in further excavation of the offset area, and so sort of a more expeditious path forward was to treat it as if it would be eligible and then move forward on that path. And so I think all in all, that's been a good tactic that we took, and now that we think we're going to be able to avoid the site altogether, I think it's working out well.
Okay.
Especially if you can avoid it, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So federal project, so a lot's happened over the last couple of months in trying to position our project to be eligible for pre-construction engineering and design funding from the Corps. So staff has worked with the district staff to revise the total project cost primarily based on the cost that we know for Southport. So I think as I put in the report, the total revised first cost is now just shy of, just over $980 million as opposed to, or compared to, the previous first cost of $1.2 billion. The total project cost, and this has to do with how they escalate things for construction and that, the total revised project cost is essentially $1.1 billion, which is almost $300 million less than the previous total project cost of almost $1.4 billion. So when we run those costs through our black box, it's not the same black box that the Corps uses, but we think it's fairly accurate, and we make some adjustments for the increase in benefits over time. Same as there's escalation in cost, there's also an escalation in benefits over time. We end up roughly at a 2.1 BCR at 7%.
Yay.
This is up from 1.2. Now, we're not at 2.5, but we're a lot closer. A lot closer. The economic analysis that the district is doing or performing will be completed at the end of the month, and that's where their numbers for benefits are calculated, and they do some other analysis on interest during construction and other things. We just learned yesterday that they have a little more flexibility on how they're going to treat Southport for that interest during construction calculation, which could result, if our estimates on the increase in benefits aligns well with what the Corps is going to use, it could result in a slightly higher BCR than 2.1. I'm not banking on it. I think 2.1 is likely where we're going to end up. But I'm an optimist, so I'm hopeful that we'll see something a little bit better. The other benefit, so that's the one that is supposed to be used for making funding decisions. But what's interesting to note is that the Corps also calculates a remaining benefit, remaining cost ratio. And that will remove Southport from all, as a sunk cost. And so then they recalculate the BCR saying Southport's done, what remains to complete the project. So it's a remaining benefit cost ratio. And because we don't realize our benefits until the entire project is complete, benefits stay the same, the cost gets reduced further. Again, when we run it through our black box and crank the handle, we get a 2.4 on that one. And again, with the way that the Corps may be able to use its flexibility, it's possible that it could be a little higher than that. I'm not hanging my hat on it, but again, I'm an optimist.
Greg, what do they, what's their value of the Southport project now?
Well,
I mean, we have a construction cost, but they still have a budget amount that's higher, I would assume, huh?
they took our costs
Took our costs.
completely.
Okay,
So we have some costs and we have costs under contract. So basically what they did is they took our costs and then assigned a contingency value to it. So our sunk cost, I think, had a contingency of something like 2%, in case there's challenges later on.
okay, so it's pretty
And then
firm.
on our contracted cost, I think it had a contingency of maybe 10%, as opposed to the 25 and
25,
30%
yeah.
that they had been using. So that really brought the cost down. And when you look at the difference in 1.4 billion versus 1.1 billion in the total project cost, that's a $300 million reduction in the Southport cost.
Okay, okay.
But I think when you compare the revised BCR of 2.1 roughly, and the remaining BCR that they'll calculate that hopefully is on the order of 2.4, the story that it tells is the work that we're doing, it not only is advancing flood risk reduction and providing, safety to the community, but it's also placing us in a much more favorable position for funding, and I think it tells a really great story. So I think this is something that we're going to want to work into our lobbying effort and our messaging, that we're a good investment. Everything that we do pays dividends, puts us in a better financial position, and that we're not a risk and that we should receive funding for PED and New Start. So I think that's the big message there. I think I mentioned that the Corps' work on the econ analysis is due end of the month. The cost is currently with the Walla Walla District in Washington for review and concurrence. We hope to have those costs and all the econ analysis to division for their review and approval in early December. And to that end, we've scheduled a meeting with division staff who will be reviewing, high-level division staff who will be reviewing and making those approvals for December 4 is that meeting. And so we want to provide a little more relationship building, a little more informal face-to-face, and also be able to talk a little more in detail about the work that we've been doing with the district and the benefit that it's having on the benefit cost ratio. This 2.1 versus 2.4 story, we'll introduce that to them and let them know how important it is that we receive their support for funding and that we're a good investment. So hopefully all that lines up about the time that they're going to receive these packages and should help their review. And keep our fingers crossed.
Okay. So we need division concurrence before they become official?
Yeah, before it gets transmitted to
It
headquarters.
doesn't, we don't go to headquarters, do we, or?
I don't know that we'll need to go to
Okay.
headquarters. The folks at headquarters provided, back on the last lobbying trip that the mayor and the city manager took, a lot of the suggestions, stuff that we were already working on, but the headquarters staff was fully supportive of the effort that we were undertaking to revise the benefit cost ratio. District seemed a little out of the loop. Division seemed a little out of the loop on that. So we did have a vertical call. Based on the comments made during the vertical call, it was obvious that the division didn't really have a good understanding of what Sacramento has accomplished, what we're currently doing with Southport and how that's a big part of the overall federal project, how the work that we're doing in Southport is improving our benefit cost ratio. So that's more what we're going to do with them when we
Okay.
meet on that December 4. And then, real briefly, back on October 25th, during the 2017 California Flood Preparedness Week, we had an event over at Stonegate Elementary School, similar to previous years. We had a little press event and met with Miss Reeves' third grade class. Councilmember Karina Roscoe attended and spoke on behalf of the city and the efforts that the city and WSAFCA are doing to reduce the risk of flooding to the community and stress how important it is to be prepared in the case of a flood emergency. So the students were very engaged. It turns out that Miss Reeves grew up in an area that was prone to flooding, and her elementary school flooded while she attended school there. So she took this to heart and did a lot of work with the kids in advance of the event. I've never seen so many kids flood prepared for this event since we've been doing this over the last 5 years. It was quite heartwarming. It was entertaining. The kids were very engaged, and they were spot on. So they knew about planning. They knew about what to pack and when to pack, and they were right on the money with flood insurance too. So it was pretty fun to watch. We had the Flood Challenge video game going again, which was a big hit. Also, that DWR flood simulation model was also a big hit, where the kids get to pour water and see how it affects the floodplain and areas that are levied or not levied. So it was a very good event. And there's a link in the progress report. You can take a look at an article, and so it's a still motion video of the event, lots of photographs, and it was very nice. And then lastly, I just want to let the board, or make the board aware of some changes that are going to be taking place over the course of the next few months on the administration side of things. So as you may notice, Chelsea Grow is not sitting over here clerking the meeting. A couple of weeks ago, Chelsea gave notice that she planned to retire from her work here at the city and pursue a career at home as a full-time mom. So her last day was Monday of this week. So we bid her a fond farewell. We'll definitely miss her. We do have other staff that are going to be stepping in an interim basis until a more permanent solution is provided. So the city is looking at ways of filling the position. And so we'll bring more information to the board as that process moves forward. And then another change that'll be taking place is Phil Wright, the WSAFCA treasurer, gave his notice early this month of his intent to retire at the end of this calendar year. So I believe the city has already put out or started a recruitment to fill that vacancy. Keep the board updated as that goes, and also if the replacement extends beyond the end of the year, then we'll let the board know what options are available to move forward on an interim basis for an interim WSAFCA treasurer. So we'll keep you posted. That concludes my updates. Be happy to answer any questions.
I have one,
Go ahead.
and it's under floodplain administration. It says the city's floodplain management ordinance. Do you have a copy of that?
I can get you a copy of that. Yeah.
I think each one of the members should have a copy of that if they get it for them.
Okay.
Just to understand, exactly what they're doing and why they're doing. When they hold these meetings pertaining to floodplain management and whatnot, do you send out a request or a notification to the West Safco board or the reclamation districts of a meeting that they could and would participate in or something of that nature? Because I don't understand what you mean by floodplain management.
So the city has an ordinance on floodplain management, and it primarily deals with development and in and around or in adjacent to levees and other flood facilities, both internal drainage as well as sort of the external levees. There are no regular meetings related to floodplain management. The ordinance itself resides, like many other ordinances the city has, for, how we use the sewer system, trees, and other things. Now, any updates to the floodplain management ordinance would go before the city council for consideration and adoption, and I think, and that's done at a public meeting. So in advance of any floodplain management ordinance update, we would bring an item to the board for information and discussion, and certainly the board would be invited or notified of a meeting that would go before the city council for any type of consideration. So, and we can extend the same direct invite to the RDs as well.
That's it. Very good. If there's no other comments or questions, then we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
I can make my 10 a.m. call again. Thank you.
Right on time.
That's what I'm-